Hey, Tim Kerley here with your Friday FAQ, and this week's question is, what is a PIW, also known as a property inspection waiver? So you may have seen this with some of your buyers. You probably haven't heard that term, PIW, but this is something that can occur on a conventional loan only. On any of the government programs on a purchase, you're always going to need an appraisal done. But on a conventional loan, what that means is if the borrower or buyer is eligible for a property inspection waiver, then that means you don't have to get an appraisal. An appraisal is not required to complete the transaction. So just to kind of give you a little background, with conventional loans, we have two agency investors, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, are kind of quasi-government agencies. They each have their own automated underwriting systems, which we refer to in the lending business as AUSs. So Fannie Mae's is DU, Desktop Underwriter. Freddie Mac's is LP, Loan Prospector. So they have, the underwriting algorithm, and the two investors can tweak that from time to time or anytime they want to, really. But the property inspection waiver would come into play whenever all the information and the data is loaded into their automated underwriting system, and it might come back and say, okay, we accept the value on the contract for this particular property, or really, our data algorithm, AI, whatever you want to call it, accepts the value. So we will issue a property inspection waiver, and an appraisal is not required. Now, the PIW doesn't have to be accepted by the buyer. And I have had buyers in the past who said, I still want to get an appraisal because I want to know what the property value is. But just know that is there and can be used. Usually that's a situation where the lender is going to ask the buyer, you have this property inspection waiver. Do you want to accept that, or do you want to go ahead and get an appraisal? Now, some things that are really important to note is typically a PIW is going to come into play if you've got a buyer who's putting a large amount down, or your loan to value is pretty low. But you can't always tell, and usually these would be pretty strong buyers as well from a financial and credit score standpoint. But you can't always look at the algorithm and say, oh, this one, will get a PIW, because I can tell you I've had a number of loans where I looked at it and said, I cannot believe that the system issued a PIW on this particular file. Likewise, I've had a number recently that I've looked at and said, this is a slam dunk for a property inspection waiver, didn't get one. So, I can only imagine, again, that these investors tweak their algorithm from time to time, whatever their requirements are in their systems. Sometimes you get the PIW, sometimes you don't. Another thing that is really important to note is if anything changes on that loan file, the lender's going to run the automated underwriting system up front and then again right before closing. So if anything has changed on that, it could knock the buyer out of the PIW. So as an example, let's say the buyer comes in at first and they're going to do a $100,000 down payment, and for whatever reason, something changes during the process. Now they're not going to do a $100,000 down payment. They're just going to do a minimum down payment of 5% down. So maybe back in the beginning, you had the PIW, or the lender had the PIW. Now they don't, because the buyers changed their down payment. So now an appraisal is going to be required. So that's the one thing that gets a little bit tricky, is the borrower needs to understand that they can't really make any changes if they're going to go with the PIW, because you don't want to come up right before closing. Something is now changed, the underwriting is different, and now you've got to have an appraisal, and you don't have time to do that. So just be aware of that. Okay, so I hope that is helpful to you. If you have any questions about appraisal waivers, again, you probably haven't heard the term PIW, but that's what that is. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.